Andrew and Oscar, if you were telling the story of how you came to this night, you would have your own way of telling it. And it might include, or probably would include, the moment that you remember you first started thinking about it, or maybe was somebody suggested it to you that you come into the Catholic Church or come into full communion. It might include the time you've spent thinking about it, going back and forth, and et cetera, et cetera. And then the moment when you decided, certainly, that you wanted to do it and asked for it. And then the process, the OCIA process of you coming to this night. And there would be, on the one hand, a kind of, certainly a natural part of the story. It would be ordinary, the idea popped in your head, or someone suggested it to you, or invited you, and whatever you did, it'd be kind of an earthly aspect to the story, But there's a mysterious part of your story as well, a part that you probably can't really even explain. If the idea popped in your head, okay, how did that, we say that all the time, but where did that idea come from? Or someone suggested it to you, who moved them to suggest it to you, I was struck downstairs by this little detail. I've heard it 100 times, but when God wanted to part the Red Sea, God, what we just heard is, made a stiff wind blow, and it dried out the sea, And it struck me how often, most of the time really, God uses ordinary ways to accomplish his purposes. God could have just said, sea, part, but used natural occurrence, a wind drying out. And so the same way in our lives, almost always, it's a natural thing. An idea came to you. We get 1,000 ideas come to us all the time. We don't know why. We're walking along and an idea pops in our head. Or a person says something to you, Someone in your family likely was the first one to mention it, Or you were thinking of it just because someone in your family is going to Mass, Natural things. But underneath those natural occurrences, we believe is the hand of God, is the mind of God. And I don't know where you would start your story, probably whenever the idea first came up. But the truth is, the story of you coming into full communion, into God's church, began before you were even born. That idea was in God's mind from the beginning of time, or before time, really. And that's the mysterious part of this, is God working in you and through other people to bring you to this night. And all of us have the same dynamic going on. Some of us here are what we call converts. They came into the church later. As I look out, I can see people who came in this parish, came in on previous Easter vigils. And those of us we call ourselves cradle Catholics, we think, well, my parents decided to have me baptized. When I was born, at that time, there was really not much thinking about it. I mean, parents wouldn't dream of not having their child baptized, right? And it looks so natural. Okay, child's born, yeah, we got to get him baptized, we got to, But underneath that is the mind of God, is the plan of God at work, And the question really to ask ourselves then, why did God want us in his church? Why did God move us so, or move our parents, or move someone, And in a few minutes, I'll say to you that you have made your decision through careful thought and the Holy Spirit, And both are at play. God draws us, and we either say yes or no. We ignore God, or we acquiesce, We pay attention, or we don't. We follow through, or we let our idea of our life prevail. And what I would invite you to do, and actually all of us, if you've never done it, to ask ourselves, why am I in the church? Why has God brought me into the church? Why has God brought me to this parish? What does God want of me? He's brought you into the church for a reason. And the reason will partly be about you, but it will also be about him. What does he want to accomplish through you being in his church? This is not an accident. And so the question is, why did you want to come in? That's always part of it. But why does God want you here? What does God want to do with you in his church? That's a question all of us should ask ourselves, probably periodically, unless we've found the definitive answer, And if we have, then fine, follow through. But why are we here? Why are we in God's church? What does God want to accomplish through us?